Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our viewers on Torah Anytime. Hidden miracles. Hidden miracles ostensibly sounds like a contradiction in terms. Something which is miraculous is something which is outside of the normal run of events, outside of what we consider to be normality, outside of nature. So something which is hidden, how can that be miraculous? What I'd like to do tonight is to explore with you two Rambans, two very famous Rambans. Ramban was Nachmanides, Moshe ben Nachman. The first of these two Rambans is at the end of this week's Parshat Bo. It's an extremely famous Ramban, maybe one of his most famous. My Rebbe said, before Pesach, a person should try and learn the Ramban, this Ramban, it's not that long, every day for a week or two beforehand, because this is going to put him into the mindset to really appreciate what Yetzias Mitzrayim is. What does it mean to come out of Egypt? What does Pesach mean? What are we supposed to be getting out of the Pesach Seder? So it's a very fundamental, and I'm going to do it somewhat inside and somewhat outside. Inside meaning reading from the text, and outside means not reading from the text. So after describing the mitzvah, the last mitzvah in this week's Parsha, Parshat Bo, which is tefillin for Yolois al yodecha, the Tosavos beinenecha, al yodecha, al tos beinenecha, Ki b'choizek yad hotzionu Hashem mitzrayim, and there should be a sign on your hand, and totfot. Totfot means it's not a translatable word. Tefillin, that's what we call them. Between your eyes. Why? Because with chozek yod, with a strong hand, Hashem brought you out of Mitzrayim. And then after all this, the Ramban proceeds to explain why and how important are the mitzvahs concerned with the memory, the constant reminding ourselves of the exodus from Egypt. I have a non-Jewish friend in England who once said to me, he said, I'm envious of you. He said, the reason why I'm a Christian is because about 1,000 years ago, William the Conqueror and the Normans stormed across the English Channel and managed to persuade my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather that believing in the founder of Christianity was an infinitely better idea than bashing each other over the head and painting each other blue with woad. That's why I'm a Christian. He said, you're the great-great-great-grandson of the people that this actually happened to. Yetzias Mitzrayim is our connection to God. Ma'amad HaSinai, that's what we call laughingly tradition. Tradition is not a Russian milkman who's fiddling on the roof. Tradition is the lifeblood of Judaism. Why do we believe to what we believe? Is because the Ramban in another place says it's axiomatic that parents do not lie to their children about essential life information. And therefore, if all of us sitting in this room today have a belief, however strong, or maybe it's not so strong, but we have enough of a belief that this is actually the case, that we are the children of the children of the children of the people to whom this actually happened. And this tradition which has been passed down, and maybe somebody once said that's one of the reasons why we call it Passover, because that's what gets passed over. This actually happened. You actually came out of Egypt. You actually stood at Har Sinai. Now, if you want to go into a deeper explanation, understanding of how important this idea of tradition is and how essential to Judaism it is, Rabbi Gottlieb has some excellent, not for me to give him a compliment one way or the other, but they just happen to be, in my opinion, wonderful lectures called the historical verification of the Torah, which goes into basically the Kuzari's demonstration that the Torah is true, because the basic idea is it's very difficult to fake something that millions of people believe in. Because at some point in the past, you would have had to have manufactured this fake and convinced millions and millions of people that actually they saw something they didn't. Meaning, if you look at, let's say, Islam, or let's say Christianity. Christianity is based on the testimony of a handful of people that the founder of Christianity got up from the dead and walked around. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. I mean, 13, whatever, how many people they are, that's not that convincing. You can forge a conspiracy amongst 11 people. Islam is even somewhat more tenuous. The whole of Islam is based on the fact that Muhammad had a dream where the archangel Gabriel came to him and told him about what he was supposed to do. Now, maybe he had a dream, maybe he didn't have a dream. I don't know. It's a very difficult thing to prove. Of course, Islam has a tremendously powerful theological power point, which basically runs "convert or we'll kill you." I mean, the idea of conversion in both in Christianity and Islam especially, at the point of the sword, or to save your soul, as the Christians put it. So the reason why they're very, very strong today is because they are proselytizing and actively, violently proselytizing religions. Judaism, on the other hand, rejects converts except in extreme circumstances. We dissuade converts. We don't want converts. If somebody sincerely believes that they want to be Jewish, and they have to be Jewish, we accept them. But it's by the absolute opposite of those other two religions. Okay, so here we are. We're Jews. We have this tradition. And as I'm saying, the root of this tradition is this knowledge passed down, guarded, bequeathed from one generation to the next, of the veracity of the Exodus and the Ma'amad HaSinai, the fact that God gave us the Torah at Sinai. And so therefore it's actually crucial and to our continued existence as Jews that we preserve these memories and these mitzvahs, which is what I started to talk about. So Ata Omer Lecha Klal Tam Mitzvahs Rabbo. Says the Ramban, I'm going to give you a general principle in many mitzvahs. And he says as follows: from the time of the beginning of, I won't read the Hebrew, I'll just translate as I go. From the time that Avodas Gilulim, Avodah Zarah, idol worship, started to take hold in the world from the time of Enosh. Enosh was Adam HaRishon's grandson. So pretty early on in the history of man, there was a confusion about the nature of belief in God. And it comes out there were really three groups of heresy, we would probably call it. The Ramban, by the way, the beginning of Hilchos Avodah Zarah, describes how Avodah Zarah started to take hold in the world. Basically, he said that the first mistake was that people believed that seeing as, which is actually true, the Ramban says, and we'll see that in the other Ramban, that there is a truth to astrology. The stars, according to the Ramban, are the last station, so to speak, before the hashpa'ot, the influences, the supernal energy which descends from the highest places and enters into this world to create realities. The last stop on the train before it enters this world are the stars. And therefore a person who could read the stars would be able to understand something about the nature of things and the future of things. So because the stars were the agents of Hashem, so to speak, the ministers of Hashem, the mistake that took hold in the time of the Rambam says that there's a mistake that took hold in the time of Enosh, and Enosh was among them, was that seeing as the stars are the emissaries, the princes, the ministers of God, of Hashem, Therefore, they should also be given honor. They should be given honor. Because like any emissary, like any ambassador, he is representing the king himself. So the question is, and he says, this is Avodah Zarah Gomor. Now, this has always puzzled me, because I can understand why that's the beginning of a slippery slope. Once you start to give any kind of covered, honor to the emissaries of the king, it's a small step to go from giving the emissaries this honor and detaching the emissaries from he who sent them. And then that's where you can start to bowing down to the stars and bringing them sacrifices, etc., etc. But I never really understood this Ramban very well. How was that? That was already considered to be Avodah Zarah Gemura, complete Avodah Zarah. Moshe Shapiro once explained to us from a Sforno, the Sforno which explains when it says in the commandment, Lo yeh Elohim acherim al ponai. You should not have other gods al ponai. It's a strange addition. Why didn't you say you shouldn't have other gods? Al ponai literally means in my face. And he explained, maybe I can use a mashal. Who's George Bush? Who was the vice president? Kamala Harris? Yes?
George Bush?
George Bush is the president, right?
Yeah, like 20 years ago.
Who's the president now? Joe Biden, sorry. Shows how much I follow politics. I think I once said the marshal when George Bush was in power. Okay, whoever it is. Joe Biden. And well, I'm right about the vice president at least. Yeah. She's more of anyway. Kamala. Okay, we have to edit that bit out. Kamala Harris. Now let's say Kamala Harris makes a trip to Israel, and she steps off the plane and out of the front door, and of course they strike up "Hail to the Chief," right? The American presidential song. That's the greatest honor that can be, correct? There's one situation in when to strike up "Hail to the Chief" to Kamala Harris is the biggest insult that can be to the king, and that is if the king is there. If Joe Biden was standing there and they give her the honor, nothing is a bigger bizayon, disgrace, dishonor. Says the Sforno, Lo yeh Elohim acherim al ponai, says the Sforno, and I fill the entire world. What are you giving honor to the stars? I'm everywhere. There's no bigger dishonor to Hashem to give honor, even if they are his servants, in a situation where the king himself is there. And that's how the Rambam, Maimonides, explains how that, even that very, very first step of awarding honor to the stars was complete Avodah Zarah. Being as it may, that Avodah Zarah started in the times of Enosh, and says the Ramban, there were 3 heresies that took place. The first of these heresies was as follows. Kofrim be'ika. They denied, there was a group of people who denied there was a God, Rahman al-Islam at all. They said, Ha'olam kadmon. The world has always been here. Clearly, if the world has always been here, then that leaves no room for a creator. And of course, one of the things that we've been told about Hashem is that he created the world ex nihilo. He is the creator. A world which has no creation can have no creator, and therefore, according to that way of thinking, he doesn't exist. Rahman al-Islam. In point of fact, everything that we know about our lives really would suggest that to be true. Rahman al-Islam. I mean, time seems to be immutable. Time seems to have always been here. We come into the world at certain points. We leave this world at other points, but things seem to have been always the way they are. The concept of a creation is something which we have no physical experience of. That's why the Torah has to tell us. The very first word in the Torah, Bereshis, can be understood as Hashem was bara reshit. Hashem created beginning. Bereshit, bara reshit. Hashem created beginning. It's precisely to contradict this mistaken and very palpable illusion that things have always been the way they are and they always will be the way they are. Being as it may, there was one group who made this mistake and said there's no God, Chalila, and the world has always been here. Ha'olam kadmon. They denied in Hashem and they said Lohu. Umehem, another group, they denied in Hashem's Yediah Hapratis, his individual knowledge. Va'omra, and they said Ika Yada Kael, or Yodea Kael, V'yesh Dea Be'elyon. In other words, how does God know? And is there knowledge in the Most High? This is a posik from Tehillim. Ramban created this verse in the Psalms that says, how does God know and is there knowledge in the Most High? Meaning, they admitted there was a God. They believed in a God, but they believed that we would probably say it in English, his transcendence precluded his immanence. Meaning, the fact that he's so removed. How does God know? Is there knowledge in the Most High? Meaning that God is so, we would say nowadays, out there, so removed, so distant, so spiritual, so removed from everything to do with this world, that by definition, he cannot know what's going on in this world. So that was the first group. They didn't believe in anything, in a God. The world's always been here. Second group, they believed in their God, but they denied in Hashem's knowledge. Third group, all of these, of course, are mistaken, which each one of them is slightly less serious than the one before. There was another group who admitted to Hashem's knowledge. They said that God's transcendence does not preclude his immanence. And in point of fact, this is something that we testify to in the Kedusha prayer. We say, Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzvokos. And then the next line we say, what's the Lashon only? That the Kodesh Baruch Hu is Moleh Kol HaOlam. Got to see it here? Okay, we'll leave it for now. But basically, yeah, okay, if you could. Thank you. So the first line of the Kedusha is Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Anything which is repeated. Yeah. Kadosh, 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 anything repeated 3 times is something which is, how do you say, the Lashon of Chazakah is very strong, is very ultimate, 3 repetitions of something. So Hashem is Kadosh. Kadosh means holy, but it also means separate. Interesting, the word in Hebrew for a prostitute is a kadesha. How can you call a kadesha somebody which is kadosh? No, because kadosh means separate. A kadesha is separated for a specific activity. So kadosh, kadosh, kadosh means Hashem is totally removed, totally transcendent, separated completely. Hashem tzavakos, malay oretz kavodo. But all the world is full of his kavod. Sounds like a contradiction in terms. It's exactly to illustrate something which is impossible for us to understand. That on the one hand is totally removed, totally transcendent, but Melo Ha'aretz Kavodo, his honor, his kavod fills the entire world. He's omnipresent, he's everywhere, he's here, and yet on the other hand, he's totally transcendent. This was a paradox that group in the time of Enosh found impossible to believe in. Okay, so one group number 1, they didn't believe at all. Group number 2, they believed, but they understood Hashem's transcendence precluded his immanence. Third group said no. They understood or they accepted that Hashem could be both. He could be transcendent and he could be immanent, but they Yodu b'yidia umachishim b'hashkacha. They denied something which is called hashkacha. Hashkacha means specific supervision. In other words, there's a God, he knows, but he doesn't care. He's not going to intervene, interact. They said, V'yasu odom kidgei hayom. that Hashem made man like the fish of the sea, shelo yashgiach hakel behem, that Hashem does not supervise them, ve'enim on onesh o sechar, and there is no reward or punishment when it comes to the fish of the sea. If a shark goes and tears another shark, or that matter, a human being, to pieces, he will not be punished. He's not held accountable. There is no schar v'onesh. This group of people believe that there's a God, and he knows, but he doesn't care, meaning there's no specific supervision of any particular, of man. Man is left none other than the fish of the sea. Now it's interesting because this is actually the subject of a machalokus in the Gemara, because it says there's no blade that grows in the field without a malach, an angel, standing over it and hitting it and saying, Gadal, grow. So I'm going to leave that to one side. Clearly the Ramban understands that there is no hashgacha klalis, general supervision when it comes to fish. Now, it could be that Hashem, if he wants a specific, a species of fish to survive, there will be hashgacha, there will be intervention to make sure that particular genus, that particular species will survive. But each individual fish by itself, there is no hashgacha, there is no specific supervision. Again, it could be there might be a situation, for example, with the prophet Yonah, where there was a specific fish who was designated to swallow Jonah. But that's only to the extent that that was necessary for that fish's interface with Yonah. The fish itself, there was no necessity or no hashgacha when it came to the fish per se by itself, only to the extent that it was necessary to create the situation for Yonah. Says the Ramban, this group of people did not believe that Hashem is interested in us. And therefore there is no schar v'onesh, there's no reward or punishment. What's the connection? Reward and punishment are a direct result of a relationship. Any relationship where there's no reward and punishment, and I don't necessarily mean violence, but what I mean, any relationship where there are no totzaot, we'd say in Hebrew, there are no ramifications, repercussions, is not a real relationship. Let's say somebody gets engaged, whoever needs to get engaged should get engaged soon. And let's say you have this wonderful party here at the dining room, in the dining room of Osameach. I remember coming to David's vort last week, and reminded me of my vort that was here some 33 odd years ago. Nothing's been changed in the dining room to preserve its antiquity. So I think there's probably a government preservation order to keep it. Anyway, so a vote. So this is celebration, the chatan and the kala, the chos and kala, they get engaged, they're makabel, the handkerchief, they do a kabbalas kinyan, they do everything. And then the chassan goes home, the kala goes home. The chassan doesn't call the kala for a week. What happens? Oy vavoy. Anytime there's a relationship, what you do matters. If what you do doesn't matter, there is no relationship. The only reason for schar and onish, reward and punishment, in our relationship with Hashem is a litmus test, is an indicator of the fact that there's a relationship there. What we do matters. And of course that's the same idea as hashgacha. Hashem supervises man because he's interested in having a relationship with man. And therefore what we do matters. Therefore and that is the totzah, the result of that is there's something called schar v'onesh. What I do affects my relationship. Of course, schar and onesh, when we're talking about our relationship with God, is how close are we going to be to God? The ultimate punishment is to be completely cut off from God. The total richuk, the total distancing. And the ultimate schar is to be close to God. That's the ultimate reward. All of these things are totally relevant to relationship. So again, we've got three groups. Please stop me if I say anything that doesn't sound right or it's not clear. Three groups of people in the generation of Enosh. Total deniers, people who believe but denied Hashem's, could understand what's going on down here, he's too out there. Third group who said, no, there is a God, he knows, but he doesn't care. There's no hashkacha, we're like the fish. And says the Ramban, Ukasher yirtza Elokim be'eda or be'yochid v'yasu imohem mofes b'shinui min hogo shel olam v'tivoi izbareh lakol bittul adeus ha'elu kulam. And when Hashem will desire a people, the Jewish people, or be'yochid, Avram Avinu, let's say, and he will make with them a miracle in the change of the conduct of nature, it will become clear to everybody the absolute nullification of these three mistaken opinions. Because Hamofes Hanifla, an amazing miracle, Moreh testifies, Sheyesh, that there is a God who created it, V'yodea, and he knows, Umashkiach, and he supervises, he wants a relationship, and he adds a fourth thing now, V'yochol, and he's able, he's omnipotent. The plagues of Egypt, the change of the nature in those 10 ways, was to put paid, says the Ramban, for those three mistakes, three mistaken ideas, three groups of people, and that started already in the generation of Enosh and extended until the time of the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians. Ukasher yeha moifes hahu nigzar tchila, and when this sign, this miracle, will be pre-announced, coming to a theater near you, this will, what's the word in English? Will verify. Let me read this again, sorry. And when this sign will be pre-announced, before it happens, through the mouth of a prophet, Moshe v'Aaron, it will become clear from this, in addition, Amitas HaNevuah, the proof of prophecy, Ki yadaber Elokim es ha'odam, that Hashem speaks to man, v'yigale sodo, and he reveals his secrets, el avadav ha'naviim, to his servants, the prophets, v'yiskaim imzeh Torah ha'Torah kula, and through this the entire Torah will be established and upheld. Let's just add a couple of things here. So apart from these three, the miracles of Egypt, in addition to the three categories of people that it put paid to, contradicted, finally, two other things, very important things, were established by the miracles of Egypt. Number 4, that Hashem could do anything he wants. He's omnipotent. And number 5, that there's something called prophecy. Why? Because each of these plagues were pre-announced. Meaning what? That if Moshe comes and tells Paro, next Tuesday there's going to be a plague of hail, and it happens, how did Moshe know about that? Somebody must have told him. Who told him? Hashem. And on this last point, this 5th aspect of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the entire Torah rests. Why? Because it was essential for Klal Yisrael to know that there is such a thing called prophecy. Because if you remember when God gave the Torah at Sinai, the only thing the Jewish people actually heard from the mouth of Hashem was the first 2 mitzvahs. With each of those first 2 mitzvahs, the Jewish people died. Why did they die? Not because Hashem killed them, chas v'chalila. It's because with the revelation of Hashem, the revelation of the source of life itself. So every individual life was inextricably drawn back to the mothership, back to the source. It was impossible, so to speak, for the life to stay in their bodies because there was such a strong revelation of the Makor Chaim. Hashem put the souls back into our bodies, but after two of these experiences, the Klal Yisrael said, basta, it's enough. And Moshe Rabbeinu went up to get the Torah from Sinai. the whole Torah that we have, apart from the first two mitzvahs in the Ten Commandments, we know of only because Moshe Rabbeinu brought them down to us. How do we know it's true? Maybe he made it up there. The answer is that Hashem specifically wanted to pre-announce all the plagues to demonstrate there's a thing called prophecy, because as the Ramban says, the entire Torah depends on our knowledge of the truth of prophecy, that there is something called prophecy, that Hashem speaks to his servants, the prophets. And therefore, now the Ramban brings 4 psukim to illustrate these ideas. Ulechein yoma hakosuv b'movsim leman teida ki ani Hashem b'kerev ha'aretz. They're not necessarily in the order of the mistaken groups, but let's just go through them. He brings them here in the order they appear in the Torah. So the first pasuk we're going to deal with is, in order you should know that I am Hashem b'kerev ha'aretz, in the midst of the land. Now, what of those 3 mistaken ideas would you think that pasuk is coming to contradict? The midst of the land suggested that Hashem is involved. I'm involved. There is something called hashgacha. There's an interface. There's a relationship. As the Ramban said, the Ramban says, "Loros al hashgacha, ki lo azov oisa lemikrim kedatam." That Hashem did not abandon us to happenstance, as was the Egyptians' opinion. But that's what the world's all about. And again, it says, "Va'oma in Tes," in the following chapter, "Leman teida ki lashem ha'aretz." In order you should know that Hashem, the land belongs to Hashem. It is to Hashem, the Aretz. That teaches us about chidush. The earth, the creation, is Hashem's, meaning He created it. That He created it out of nothing. And another pasuk, which is in Yud also in Tes, Yud Daled, Ba'avot teda ki ein kamoni b'chol ha'aretz, that teaches us all about Hashem's yicholas. You should know that there's no one like me, says Hashem, in all the land. Teaching us Hashem's omnipotence, that He rules over everything, and nothing holds back His hand. Because as we said before, in all of these, the Mitzrim, the Egyptians either denied these outright, or mesupokim, they were in doubt. And therefore, great powerful signs put paid to these mistakes. Okay, so that's really the first part of what we wanted to say tonight. There's another section here, the Ramban says, and this is a question I think many people have. People often come up to me and say, "Rabbi, very nice for the Jews in Egypt. They had all this demonstration of supernatural power. That's why they believed. You know something? If Shem wants to come and perform a miracle for me now, I'll believe him. Why am I different?" So I have a mashal which is somewhat based on Rav Yisrael Salanta, although I'm sure he didn't say it quite in this way. The mashal, the parable goes like this. Once there was a young girl who lived in London who was a brilliant concert pianist. At the age of 5, she could play Rachmaninoff as good as the best. Now, her parents were in a bit of a quandary. On the one hand, they felt that her talent, the talent of the world, shaking talent like this, should not be hidden under a bushel, should be revealed to the world. On the other hand, they didn't want it to be turned into a circus freak, a 5-year-old girl who can play piano like that. Of course, this is before the days of America's Got Talent, where, where 5-year-old girls are probably considered to be a bit old to be on that program. So what do? They book a place called the Albert Hall in London. The Albert Hall is one of the premier concert venues. And they decide they're going to give a once and once only concert in which she will demonstrate her outstanding prowess. And then after that, she's going to go back to being a normal schoolgirl like anybody else. So, they invite the world's media and the press are there. And of course, they want to make sure that seeing as this once and once only event will not be forgotten, they manufacture these souvenirs. There's a tiara with with keys. And there's a bracelet with a little grand piano hanging off it, all to remember this amazing concert. So the concert takes place, and of course she wows the entire world, and people can't believe it. And she goes back the following week to being a normal, ordinary, regular schoolgirl. About 3 months later, these yobos turn up at her parents' suburban house. Now I can see you're frowning. I don't know how you say yobo in American, but it's like uncouth kind of lowlifes. In England, they would probably have Cockney accents, something like this. You're a lot, how are you? That's the sort of people I'm talking about. What do they call them in America? Okay, doesn't matter. So these yobos turn up at the house. Not hobo. No. Yobo is like street roughs. So these guys turn up, and they bang on the door, and the father of the girl answers the door, and they say, we've heard that your daughter's like a really good piano player. Yeah, that's what we heard, but we actually don't believe it unless she comes down here now from doing her homework and gives us a nice little Rachmaninoff on your Steinway grand right here in the living room. And if she doesn't do that, we don't believe. What do you say to these guys? On your bike. Who are you? Get out of here. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to jump through hoops in every generation to prove to every atheist that he exists. He performed his once and once only concert to demonstrate his power. And we have preserved the souvenirs. We have the tiara, our tefillin. We have on our head and on our arm to remember that it actually happened. But because man is created with choice, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not reveal himself to every Tom, Dick, and Harry in every generation, because the whole point of the creation is that Hashem should be hidden and we should find him. He demonstrated it once, that's it. He's not going to go, that's basically what the Ramban says, added a little bit of salt and pepper. And that's why he says, and this is really important. Now, let me read it. And because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not perform signs and wonders in every generation, in front of the eyes of every evil person or denier, Yitzhava Osona, he commanded us that we would make a constant reminder and a sign that for the things that our eyes saw. And we will pass this over, we'll copy this over the thing to our children and to their children's children and to all the children until the final generation. And we will, hismid, I don't know how you translate it in English, we will make constant, very constant, in this matter. For example, and the Torah is extremely stringent when it comes to this. For example, that a person is chayiv kores, a terrible punishment, which can mean several things. It can mean dying without children, Rahman al-Itzlan. It can mean dying early. What for? For eating chometz on Pesach. A bit of bread? Yes, because it's so vital that this knowledge has to be passed over. Another thing that a person can get kores for, Rahman al-Itzlan, is in the days of the Beis HaMikdash, if the Korban Pesach was left over till morning. Very, very stringent punishments. We have to write, as I said, what we saw, offer signs on our arms, and our heads and on our doorposts. And we have to say morning and night in Kriya Shema, in the third paragraph, to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. L'man tizko es yom tzeitzach meretz Mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha. And for the same reason, we will have to make a sukkah in every generation. Okay, I'm going to stop here, because if you notice, we didn't answer the question, hidden miracles. We've talked a lot about open miracles. What I'd like to do is to continue next week, Bezrat Hashem, and show how all of these great open miracles lead to what really is the Ramban wants to lead up to here, which is the essence of the Pesach, the Passover experience, which is the understanding of hidden miracles. Gentlemen, I hope to see you next week.